Okay, so the third part of the exposure triangle is ISO. We should have a fairly firm understanding of aperture and shutter speed by now. So let's see how ISO kind of fits into the picture and kind of understand what it is and how we use it. So what is ISO? When digital photography came along, ISO replaced ASA, which was known as film speed. And it's essentially the camera's sensitivity to light. It's actually the sensor in your camera. That's what becomes more or less sensitive. But it is essentially the same thing as when you would have different types of film speed. They would either be more or less sensitive to light. And that would allow the camera to process the light and to capture the light a little bit quicker. So ISO for us is mostly used when you don't have enough available light. You're in a low light situation and you want to shoot something at the given aperture that you are at. ISO will allow us to hopefully get to a fast enough shutter speed to hand hold that shot. There is, however, a drawback, which is digital noise. And this is an example of the exact same image taken with two different ISO settings. And you can see it's not as sharp as I would have liked, but it was just done really quickly. But you can see that you're starting to see kind of these artifacts or this degradation of the image on the left at that high ISO, where you're not seeing that in the lower ISOs. Now this is certainly a drawback, but when you absolutely need to get a shot, then you are willing to live with this digital noise that is introduced into your image. That being said, whenever possible, we want to shoot at the lowest ISO possible to eliminate that. You'll also, if you've ever seen a lot of older black and white images, you'll notice that this it's not called digital noise back then, but it's called grain was introduced, and it is quite a common technique for black and white photography. So one of the things that you can do is if you are shooting with higher ISOs and you are getting a lot of this digital noise, convert it to black and white and it still looks amazing. So ASA film speed, for those of you guys that have never even seen film before, so it was the film sensitivity to light, and again, the higher the ISA, that was kind of the film speed, the more sensitive the film was. So to me, the true advantage of digital over film is ISO. It used to be that the photographers would have to buy different kinds of film based on the film speed for the location, the lighting conditions, and then kind of what the subject was, and it would have to buy different types of film for each of those. And essentially you would have to use up your entire roll of film and then put in another film for a different type of shooting. So with digital photography, we can just switch the ISO in our cameras very quickly, and we don't need to be constantly purchasing different speeds of film. So it's a huge advantage for digital photography, and obviously it has made the process significantly simpler and cheaper. So the camera sensitivity to light, these are typical ISO values found in our cameras. Some of the more advanced cameras will have even higher numbers than these, but these are the ones that we see in our Canon XSIs. And we will notice that like everything else that we've started to learn about photography, everything is kind of a doubling or a halving, which equals a stop of light. So while the ISO is not actually controlling the amount of light coming in, it is allowing us to make the camera double or half as sensitive to that light. So a step up is one stop of light. So if I go from 100 to 200, we are making the camera twice as sensitive to light. Okay, and if I go from like 800 to down to 400, okay, we are making it half as sensitive. So again, it's that step up and step down. So when we do step up and we are increasing the ISO, it's going to allow us to either change the shutter speed or the aperture to account for that extra sensitivity that we have given it. So that will allow us to either choose faster shutter speeds or smaller apertures. So for us, let's just make this nice and simple. There's really only two important ISOs that we need to understand, and the first one is ISO 100. This is our default for shooting outside. So anytime we go outside, we're going to set our camera to ISO 100. Just understand that I am talking about daylight here, okay? If you do boost it up any higher, you're going to find that a lot of the time excuse me, your images do become overexposed. And now, on overcast days, you might find that you have to boost your ISO up to 200 or maybe even 400. But for the most part, we go outside, just set your camera to ISO 100, and 99% of the time, you should be good to go. On the flip side, when we're shooting inside without flash, we need to set our camera to an ISO of 800. Generally speaking, we're using very large apertures, usually 1.8, and that will allow us to be able to handhold most of our shots. Okay, so again, same things. There's going to be times where you're going to have to boost it up to 1600, and occasionally, if you're by big windows where there's lots of light coming in, you might even be able to get it down to ISO 400. But a couple of simple rules: you go outside, ISO 100; you come inside, ISO 800. And again, both are just a starting point. You might have to go up or down a couple as you see fit. So just a quick ISO example. So here's the camera values. We've got f8, 1/250th of a second at ISO 200. This is giving us a proper exposure. If we increase our ISO to 200, so we're going from 200 to 400, the camera is becoming twice as sensitive. That means that we can either stop down our shutter, okay, so from 1/250th of a second to down to 1/500th of a second, or we can go from f8 to f11. Okay, and if we increase it one more stop, we can now go all the way to 1,000th of a second or to f16. And then if we decrease to 100, so we have made the camera less sensitive, we would then have to either make our aperture bigger, so from f8 to f5.6, or change our shutter speed and make it a little bit slower, so from 1/250th of a second down to 125th. Okay, a really quick recap. So ISO is the camera's sensitivity to light. It's actually the sensor in your camera that becomes more or less sensitive, but for right now, it's the camera sensitivity to light. The higher the ISO, the faster the camera is then able to process the light. Okay, the more sensitive it becomes. Increasing ISO will also increase that digital noise. So whenever possible, we want to make sure that we are shooting at the lowest ISO possible. And for us, we are using ISO primarily for achieving faster shutter speeds. So we're just going to follow those two simple rules. When we go outside, we're going to set our ISO to 100. When we're inside, we're going to set it to 800. If we need to, get an extra stop of light, or we want to get a little bit deeper depth of field in one of our images, then we might increase our ISO to give us that option. So that's it. We'll see you in the next one.